ladies and gentlemen, we about to start our fifth meeting, fifth big music evening. Okay, and tonight we're gonna discuss Ray Charles and his collaborators on his magnificent album, a Grammy Award winning album, 8 Grammys. This one is called Genius Loves Company. And my name is Dmitry Tsvetkov. This is American Center. American Center is a terrific place when you can go and discuss almost everything there's about America. And as to our series of lectures, briefly, what we have already discussed, here we are. We started with Frank Sinatra with his best-selling album called Come Dance With Me. And then we had Michael Jackson's Thriller, the best-selling album in history. And then we had Christmas Special. We discussed Bing Crosby and many other recording artists who did terrific Christmas albums and singles. And in January we did Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga, Cheek to Cheek, terrific album. And that is perhaps what I want to share with the public, the vision of music and the understanding of culture, because so many people today are divided by their musical taste. But in fact, if you took these albums, they have all terrific sales. But some people from music industry give very low credit to the audience, and they think that the audience is not smart enough. That's not true, because look at Thriller, which is the best-selling album in the world. It's the album of a very great quality. And of course, two extremes in popular culture. First is being too simplified, and second is being too complicated or too hip. And these extremes both divide people, of course. They divide people, and we need to find a balance. And Ray Charles, for my money, he's the one who found the balance, who made very successful albums and singles from the 50s to nowadays. He's got terrific sales. His records got terrific sales. And Ray Charles Robinson, born in Georgia State, it's right here, on south of the United States, in 1930. And of course, being on south during the mid-20th century, he of course faced the racism and all the problems that came in the south back then. And nevertheless, as he was born in a very poor family, his father left his family very quick, and he was left along with his mother, who was very strict, but she was not rude to him. She loved him immensely, and she was a terrific woman who understood that to make him a successful man, she got to be very strict with his own son. And at the same time, during his younger years, when he was probably 3 years old or 4, he went to Red Wing Cafe, and Willie Pittman, that was the guy that told Ray Charles how to play the piano. You see all the keyboards, the notes. He started with playing with one finger, of course. See, very simple things. While Pete, as he was called, Pete was playing the main melody, and Ray was playing with one finger usually, but then he added more and more complicated walks. And at the same time, there were many challenges that Ray Charles faced, because when Ray Charles was 5 years old, his brother George died eventually. George died in a huge cup of water, because they were just playing, and Ray didn't know that George is actually dying. He's drowned. And that was the first biggest trauma that influenced Ray Charles, because Ray Charles was feeling guilty about that right till the end of his own life. He always remembered that. He always remembered this scene, because he had his sight back then when he was 5. Ray became blind at the age of 7. It was glaucoma, a horrible disease, a terrible disease. And at the same time, his mother, again, she understood that she's left with one son only, and the son went blind, and at the same time, while he was going blind and losing his sight, it was gradually. It lasted for some time, and during this time, his mother used every opportunity to teach him to do everything when he will not be able to use his eyes. And that was a terrific thing, actually, because many of the neighbors, they were mad at her. They told her, "Why do you do that to the only blind son? You shouldn't give him so much chores, to do so much homework, etc." But she was a terrific woman, and she told that he just gotta do it. He just gotta do it. And later, she sent Ray Charles to the school for blind and deaf in Florida. Yes, and this was also a very tough thing to young Ray, because he was blind, and now his mother, he begged her not to let him go to school, not to send him away, because he wanted to stay with her. But she understood that he needs an education, that without the education he will just go nowhere. And that is probably the biggest form of love, in my opinion. Sometimes you just have to let go, whether it's your son or daughter or whoever. And at this time, of course, he faced racism there at school, and some of the white kids were more privileged. Though it was very strange, because they were all blind, so whatever. You see. And another very tough thing happened to him when he was 15 years old. His mother died, and he was so much in pain, in grief. He didn't know what to do, but his mother's friend, whose name was Mae Beck, she really saved Ray Charles, in the sense that she explained to him, "Don't lose yourself and don't give up. That is not what your mother wanted you to do. Just remember every single thing she was telling you, everything she taught you." And he really understood. He tried to imagine, he imagined that, what would his mother told him, and he did it. He did. He decided to go to some other place, and that was actually terrific, because in 1948, when he was 18 years old, he moved all across the country. You see, from Florida, it's there, to Seattle, Washington. That's terrific. Because in Seattle, he started playing, he started doing occasional gigs, and he even met young Quincy Jones back then. Yeah, right? You see Florida right here. Yeah, that's Florida. And that's Seattle, this one. It's terrific, I like the shadows. Yeah. And later on, he moved to Texas, and he played some gigs there too. And at the same time, he met his first love, and had his first daughter, but the parents of his first love didn't want her to marry him, and they just split up. In total, Ray Charles had 12 children with 9 different women, but there was one specific woman, his wife, whose name is Della Beatrice Entwine. Yes, and this is the woman who, apart from his mother, gave him the biggest love ever, I guess, the biggest love. This is a picture from 1966 with Ray Charles, Della, his wife, and 3 sons of his. The oldest, Ray Charles Jr., and David, and Bobby. And his kids loved him immensely. He wasn't a good husband, that's obvious, but he was a good dad, because though he rarely seen his kids, they really tried to treasure each moment they were spending with him. And at the same time, apart from a good wife who gave him so much of a support, he met a terrific guy, Jeff Brown, who first was his driver, but Jeff Brown was a very smart guy, and Ray Charles decided to make Jeff his road manager first. on the road. And that was a very hard choice for Jeff, because he would be out of his own house and would not be able to see his wife very often, Jeff's wife. And Jeff has a very big, gave a very big encouragement to Ray Charles. And these are the ingredients of his success, because through all of his struggling, he went to 1950s when he signed to Atlantic Records, and he did some of the greatest songs in the world, some of the greatest recordings in the world, which have great sales until today. Mess Around, I Got a Woman. What I'd say, I love this song in particular because he was writing it right on the concert, because he had about 10 minutes to finish the performance. He did not have a song to do, and he just sat there and he played it, and he was composing it and inventing the lyrics at the same time singing them, and the band would follow, and it was a really terrific experience and one of the greatest singles in the world. 60s came with of course Genius Hits the Road 1960 album, where his famous recording of Georgia on My Mind, which later became the official state song of Georgia State in 1979. Georgia State is where Ray Charles was born. But eventually, due to the racism at the mid-century, at the 60s, he was even banned from performing in Georgia State. And of course, they later apologized in 1979 and made this song as an official state song. And Hit the Road Jack followed this terrific single in 1961. And at the same time, Ray Charles was always making great experiments with the styles, because he started in the late 40s. In the late 40s, you didn't have crossover music. You were either a country singer or a blues singer or jazz singer, or in the 50s you might become pop singer or rock and roll singer. Everything was on the shelves, and everybody understood who's who. And at the same time, Ray Charles went to great experiments. And he, in particular, in 1962, one of his top-selling albums, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, because all of the people at the record label told him, you ain't gonna do this. This is not your style. But Ray Charles thought, I will decide what is my style. And he was so perfect in that. He could play any song. He could play country, he could play boogie-woogie, he could play rock and roll, pop tunes, jazz tunes, soul, gospel. So many different styles, but they were all his. Because if he wanted to do something, he was very, very successful at this. And so the 60s went on, but occasionally his commercial success went to some fading due to so-called British invasion. You know that Beatles came in the mid-60s, and all the others British rock bands and American bands eventually came, especially at the end of the 60s, including the Doors and many others, and the psychedelic rock and hard rock later in the 70s. So Ray Charles just kept performing. His records were less successful, and nevertheless he kept fighting for his rights, and he supported Martin Luther King, and he really was very appreciated in American society. Though of course he fought for the rights of African Americans, because it was ridiculous. There were white fans of Ray Charles who paid very expensive tickets to sit in front, but the black people were not allowed to sit there. That was of course a big challenge, and Ray Charles always supported civil rights movements. And in the 70s his success continued. He appeared on TV, he was meeting President Nixon and many other officials. And at the same time, of course, he was not the number one, he was not at the top, of course, because time had changed. And nevertheless, he continued to do different experiments, including his 1984 album Country Duets. He made a duet with Johnny Cash and many other country stars, including Willie Nelson. So he was always up to something new, up to some collaboration. He again was appreciated by the president. He met the REAGANS, and later Ray Charles collaborated with Tony Bennett on his 1986 album, which was called The Art of Excellence, and they were singing a terrific song written by James Taylor, a famous American musician who would later become a part of the album we will discuss today. At the same time, the 90s, of course, TV, concerts, less successful records, but Ray had always a great strength, and he was very powerful, and at the same time he always had great sense of humor, because here's a picture called Spy Hard with Leslie Nielsen, and Ray Charles was playing a blind bus driver, and that's actually not far from the truth. I don't mean that he was riding buses, but he was riding a bike when he was young, and later on, when he was grown up, he was driving a car occasionally, because he could have someone sitting next to him and give him directions, or just going round and round and round if there was enough space. Of course, sometimes he went into occasional damages, but not so strong, luckily enough, not so strong. One time there was a funny thing to happen, because he was with his friend and they bumped into another car, and the people did not see who was driving, and police arrived. They of course knew Ray Charles, and they arrested his friend. That was the time when Ray said, no, it was me, and police looked like, huh? And of course police released him because no one suffered, no one get hurt. And even more, Ray Charles owned his private jet, and he wasn't the first pilot, but he sometimes tried to be the second one, because you see, the pilots, when they ain't got the view due to fog, they are almost blind, and they call it blind driving, blind flying, actually, yes. And that was what he was trying to do, and that was quite okay. And at the age of the 90s, he also appeared in different shows, including The Nanny, a famous American shows, which was also made in Russia, the adaptation of this one. And at the same time, he wanted to get back his success with the records, and he was thinking about a Duets album. And during a few years, he was making records with the top musicians of the world. And the producers of album Genius Loves Company, they were John Bach and Phil Ramone. John Bach was an artist and repertoire manager at Concord Records, the label. And Phil Ramone is a terrific producer who made some of the greatest records in history. You can see it right here. He produced Billy Joel's album The Stranger, which won Grammy Award. He produced Frank Sinatra's Duets, so he was very familiar with this, how to make duets albums, because he also made he produced Tony Bennett's album Duets, an American classic, and George Michael's album Songs from the Last Century. So Phil Ramone has got a great experience. Very few producers got, I bet. And styles of this album, again, I'm sorry I cannot see it.
Can you move 2 steps backwards, because we are live streaming the lecture now, and some people cannot see your head.
Oh yeah, that's
That's a surprise. I'm sorry, I didn't say.
No, I know about the filming. I just didn't know how it worked, and I was so thrilled by the audience and the way the audience reacts. But if I make a shadow right here, would you just wait a minute? Okay. I must do it without making a shadow, you see. We're going live on the internet, so all the world is looking at us right now. You better smile. So, the styles, country style, pop style, jazz style, with so many partners on this album, he was able to make it because there was B.B. King, who represented the blues, Diana Krall, a great jazz singer, Elton John, the great pop singer and songwriter. And the gentleman right here is playing. He's got Alexandra. Can we ask him to a little bit? Yeah, he's playing good, but we got an open mic night, and it will start later. It will start later because we're gonna start with a lecture to discuss this album, and we'll have everybody sing and play, whoever wants. Okay, and here's to the records. The first track with Norah Jones, a big singer, a Grammy Award winner, and this one was called Here We Go Again Country, and this is a great concept of the album because it starts with the song Here We Go Again, and Ray Charles is showing to his fans that I'm back. Okay.
She'll break my heart again. I'll play a part again. One more time.
You can notice the great harmonizing between the two voices of her and his. I bet this is a terrific arrangement, and Victor Vaynakur, he made the arrangements on this album, and he also received Grammy Award for the arrangements. And this song won Record of the Year Grammy Award. So that is really incredible that the country music standard from the 60s went back and won the award. So it all is worthwhile. And this next song was called Sweet Potato Pie. And this is a terrific thing about Ray Charles, because he is a very collaborative man, and he invited to perform with him some of the songwriters, such as James Taylor, who wrote this song and sang it originally in 1988. And Ray Charles was a great songwriter himself, because he wrote great songs including Hallelujah, I Just Love Her So. Frank Sinatra even recorded this one, and everybody, almost every successful singer did it. Yeah, and at the same time, on this particular album, there was no song written by Ray Charles, but it's in the way he sings the songs that makes these songs his own, because he's singing from his heart, from his experience, from all of his suffering, from all of his great experience. Yes.
I just want to testify. From now on it's me and my sweet potato pie. Oh, I just...
Yes, and the next song united jazz and country, because Diana Krall is a terrific jazz singer and a pianist, and they remade this version, a new version of old hit, which was done by Ray Charles on his most commercially successful album, solo, called You Don't Know Me.
I say you never ever know the one who loves you so. No, you don't know me.
Yes, and the next song was a pop tune written by Elton John and Bernie Taupin in 1976. Elton John is from Great Britain, but he became a part of the American music too, because he made so many shows there and collaborated with many American artists, and his songs are sung by everybody, and so many stars in the United States recorded them too. And yeah, I got this sample here.
What have I got to do when sorrow seems to be the hardest one? Ooh, yeah. What have
Yes, and the next song was a jazz standard, which he did with Natalie Cole, daughter of Nat King Cole. And this is again a great return to the tradition, because Ray Charles started with imitating Nat King Cole. Before Ray Charles had his own style and his own voice, he was afraid to do it, but first he decided to play it safe and to imitate Nat King Cole. And it was probably the biggest influence on Ray Charles, especially in early years. And of course, that was a terrific record.
Now you've heard our story.
Oh, it's your story.
Here's the point that we have made.
I'm listening.
Chicks were born to give you fever.
That's right. Be it Fahrenheit or centigrade.
They give you fever. When you kiss them, fever if you live to learn.
And that's a great interaction, because you can hear how they interact with their words. He sings, "Now listen to my story." She says, "Oh, that's your story." I really like that. And a great jazz tune. And next duet was again from his countryside. And originally he recorded this in 1984. "Do I Ever Cross Your Mind?" And a song about loneliness and broken heart. And when they sing it together, this is indeed a dialogue, because it wasn't done before they do it. Everybody was just singing it on its own. And now they did it together. And I tell you, I especially love the parts when they sing together with different voices, because that was done just incredible. And this next song, we're going to present this next song tonight, because it's the song, it was a very good year. And back then, in 1966, Frank Sinatra won Grammy Award. And actually, this was a tribute to Frank Sinatra too, because Willie Nelson recorded many jazz songs, and here they decided to continue this tradition, to introduce the song to the public, to the new audiences. And Frank Sinatra used to say, "In our business, there's only one genius, and it's Ray Charles." So, of course, Ray Charles couldn't refuse to record this song. And alright, we're gonna do it tonight. And I need the mic. Can you provide me with the mic? Alright.
Yes, I guess it's okay. All right, here we go. When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for small town girls, soft summer nights. We would hide from the lights on the village green
very good year for city girls who lived up the stairs with all their perfume hands, and it came undone.
And now we're gonna have a special guest tonight. Please give a round of applause to Evgeny Selivanov.
When I was 35, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for blue-blooded girls of independent means. We'd ride in limousines, they chauffeurs were proud. When I was 35, but now the days are short. I'm in the autumn of the years, and now I think of my life as vintage wine from final kiss. From the cream to the dregs, it puts me clear. It was a very good year.
Okay, a round of applause to Evgeny Selivanov. He'll be back on jam. Okay, and yes, they do it with Michael McDonald, Hey Girl. And this was one of the songs in particular that he sang when Ray Charles came in Russia, because he came to Russia a few times and gave concerts, even at Kremlin in 2000. Yes, and there was even Channel 1 Russia was broadcasting this one. Yes, and he was singing Hey Girl there, and all the people went wild when he started. I don't know why, whether it was a very popular song back then in 2000, but nevertheless, probably you might know this.
I'll tell you one more time. The truth is, I just can't stop loving you. No.
Yeah, that's the song. And another blues recording on the tape. He did a duet with B.B. King, A Sinner's Prayer. And I gotta tell you that, of course, Ray Charles did not have very easy relationships with the church. Though when he just started going to church, especially due to his wife, to his terrific wife, who was always going to church, and she was a very devoted Christian. Is he doing it again? I'm sorry, sir. We will have time. We'll have time, don't worry. We'll finish the lecture, and everybody will be invited to the open mic night. And you will show all the talents. There's no need to hurry. Okay. And yeah, Sinner's Prayer. Ray Charles was a drug addict, and he was on heroin for about 20 years, from his teens to the late 60s. But he was getting arrested all over the time, once and twice and all over. He was arrested, and sometime he was flying from Canada, and you see it was punished very, very hard if you bring drugs from other country, because it's about traffic. Because usual things he would somehow get along with it, but now it was from Canada, and the FBI came after him, and he went to court in the late 60s, and he was thinking about, what am I gonna face? Am I gonna face 20 years in prison? That was a real threat, and that was the time when he was offered a deal with justice, and he had to recover, to stop using heroin or other drugs, and that is what he succeeded in, though it took him a few months in hospital where he was cured from this. And it's also about his feeling of control. These were his words. He said, you gotta take control of yourself, of your body and of your mind. That was very hard for him to do, because he was blind. He lost his brother, he lost his mother, he really saw his father, and of course he had something to stick to, and unfortunately heroin was this thing. And over the 20 years he was thinking that heroin would not hurt him, though it of course hurted him, and he gave up doing heroin, and he became a much more faithful man after that, and he was very much more responsible in church. These were the members of his son, Ray Charles Jr. He told this Ray Charles was very emotional in church after he stopped using drugs. And that's Sinner's Prayer, a great duet with B.B. King, the blues record. And Ray had terrific high notes despite his being old. He hit them very, very precise. And again, the next song on the album is Heaven Help Us All. Originally was made famous by Stevie Wonder, and now he was doing it with Gladys Knight, a famous American singer. Yes. This is a classical gospel song, a very spiritual one. The next song was recorded as a duet with Johnny Mathis, and a classical song called Over the Rainbow, which was made famous by Judy Garland, and this song won Academy Award for Best Original Song, and of course it's the American classic, known by all people all over the world.
Bluebirds fly, yeah.
Yes, and Crazy Love, a soul tune on the album, originally written by Van Morrison, who's Irish, and it's again about the geography, because Ray recorded with many American singers, but also Diana Krall, who's from Canada, and Elton John from Great Britain, from England, and Van Morrison from Ireland. So that is really how music unites different people regardless of the race, nationality, religion, or any other. This was made, this is the only live recording on the tape. Yes, and as to reviews, the album is very well reviewed on Amazon and from the users and from the audience, but some of the magazines, the mass media, criticized this because Rolling Stone gave it 3 stars out of 5, and it in particular said, like Johnny Cash, Ray Charles was a tough old man who kept making music right up to the end, probably because everybody was too scared to tell him to knock it off. When he died in June, he was ready in Genius Love's Company, his version of Frank Sinatra's Duets. And they were attacking him very much, though Ray was dead when the album came out. They wrote bad reviews, or you can take at British The Guardian, his voice is a crooked shadow of his former greatness. Yes, but you've heard his voice, and you can tell it's a very good voice, considering he was in his 70s when he was recording. Many people don't live up to 70s, especially consider his conditions. Consider his conditions, because he was black, he was blind, he was very poor, but he made his way, he made the American dream come true. And his voice, eventually every voice changes over the years. But he saved the essential style, and he gained more depth in his voice. And the intonation was terrific. He sang with his heart and with his voice at the same time. Yes, and in the United States only, the album sold over 3 million copies. And the anniversary edition was made on vinyl after 10 years of successful sales. So the audience is indeed much smarter than critics from Rolling Stone think, because you cannot fool people, and you cannot fake 8 Grammys. You might argue that you can fake 1 Grammy, you can get lucky to receive 2, but you cannot fake 8. Because with all of these awards, it was the biggest probably award, album of the year, and best pop vocal album, and best engineered album, non-classical, best surround sound album, and many other awards. And this is the essential message of Ray Charles to the new generation, because he always lives with us. Though he was already dead when the album came out, he still lives on, a memory of his great records, and this particular album saves his music for us and for the next generations and for our kids and grandchildren and future. Yes, everybody will listen to this album. And yeah, before we go to the questions part, I will make the announcements. Exactly in a month, we're gonna start a big spring season. We will start on March the 17th with Elvis Presley, with the album How Great Thou Art. Yes, and then we're going to make Perry Como on April the 7th, also on Friday. Yes, because Perry Como is probably the most underrated singer of the 20th century, because it's very sad, but people are forgetting Perry Como today, and I think we gotta do justice to him and remember how really great he was. And we'll have Tina Turner, Private Dancer, on April the 21st. Yes, and here's to your questions and comments, or whatever you'd like to say. Just raise your hand, stand up, and be counted. You might not stand up. Any questions from the audience?
That
Yes.
was delivered perfect.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
What's your personal favorite song or album?
From the particular album.
No, this one.
It's very hard thing because you see every song is so different. They are united by Ray Charles and by the team of producers and Phil Ramone, a great producer. I just cannot I cannot name one, but no, it's impossible. It's impossible to choose. It will be too hard. But it's a good question. I bet the whole album. Yeah.
Which one was the most successful song?
I guess Here We Go Again, because it won Grammy Award for Record of the Year and for Best Pop Collaboration. Yeah, yeah. And it was also released as a single, and it is the first track. You see, it's very important because you can put on the CD and then, oh, I gotta go to work, but the first song you have heard it anyway. So it also, I think, makes it more successful.
Did he play any musical instruments?
Yeah, he was a great piano player because that was what he usually was doing at the recordings and on his concerts. And he also could play different instruments, including saxophone. He was playing this on the concerts. And sometimes it was hard for him, so he had to put it on, the sax, and start playing. But he did it, and he did it quite well. Yes, but basically he was playing the piano, of course, most of the time. He had a piano at his home in LA. When he was living in LA, he had a great big home in the late 60s when he recovered from drugs, and he started playing much more often at home. Because when he left the drugs, the music became the only thing that was curing him, apart from his family, of course, apart from wife and kids. He had music. He had music to play because he had those terrible memories about the passing away of his brother and mother. But he has music to cure himself, and he played piano very, very often. Yes. Thanks for the question. More questions? A shy audience today, tonight.
And what about you? Do you enjoy his music?
Yeah, I enjoy it very much because of his ability to play different styles, and he was so often called genius, but it's very true because he's a real genius, a great songwriter. Though
he played many styles, so which styles is the main?
Soul and blues, and also a lot of country records. Yes, I would say so, a lot of. Because it was his appearance in country music was very, very unusual, especially at the time, because all the country singers in the 60s, they were all white. But that's about the media, about the narrow-minded people who think that this should be done this way only, and the producers. And Ray had his own vision, and he proved that no matter what color of skin is, you can play any music.
He played country with the piano.
Yeah, he was both playing the piano and singing, and different styles, including country.
I think piano is not for country.
No, piano is for country. No, I mean, I've heard many great records by country stars. They use piano as well as the guitars.
I think the guitars and banjo.
Yeah. But that's a typical stereotype you see about the country music, because there are many great singers. When I was in my teens, I was listening to them, and then I was reading that this is country music. I couldn't believe it. I thought that country is something probably that you imagined in your mind. But then I saw that country is much broader than it's sometimes portrayed. Yeah, but yes.
How old was he when people started
considering he was a star. And what was the first song after hit?
Mess Around was the first song, and it was in 1951, and he was, or 1950, he was about 30, no, he was about 21, yes, 21, 22, so he was born in 1930, and the early 50s brought him great commercial success on Atlantic Records.
What did you tell about his beginning?
His beginning was quite tough because he had to learn everything by heart. You just cannot look. Could not look at the notes, and he had to read it with his fingertips and learn everything by heart. And at the same time, that was a great school for him, because I mean, take for example Michael Jackson. When he was recording, he was turning the lights off, so he was almost blind when doing records to concentrate on music. I cannot say that it is a big privilege, but it certainly added something to his vision of music, Ray Charles, I mean. And his beginning was in Seattle, Washington State, because he was thinking about a big city, but he was afraid to go to New York or LA right away, and he went to Seattle, Washington. And it was a big journey throughout the whole country, and he started playing there with gigs, and some of his early records in the late 40s, they were not very successful because he did not find his style at the moment. And that was his wife who told him in the early 50s, you gotta find your own style. You cannot imitate Nat King Cole or any other artist, because there's only one Nat King Cole, and we don't need more. We need you. We need your specific voice. We need your talent and your vision and your style. And that's how he came with his style. Unique style. We cannot describe it as you know, blues or country or pop. It's a big style. So that is.
What's the moment